Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning? Yesterday afternoon, I was able to provide you with a package proposal from the city. And since then, you've provided me some counters, but before we go through your counters, I would like to go ahead and go through our proposals, if you don't mind.
Okay.
What we had presented was a package proposal dealing with approximately 9 subjects, specifically 8 of the outstanding proposals or articles, not including, of course, the definitions, which is merely to help facilitate the reading of the contract. And the 9th one was to include all the current tentative agreements that we have. The first one, I'll just go in the order that it's outlined in our summary of the package proposal. On the base wages, Article 10, the salaries, the base salaries that we had proposed were 1.5 for fiscal year 14-15, 1% for fiscal year 15-16, 1% for 16-17, 1% for 17-18, and 1% for fiscal year 18 and 19. In the Article 11, which are the supplemental pays, give me a minute to open those up. On the base wage, before I move to the supplemental pays, on the base wages, we deleted the Me Too clause. We're not interested in entertaining a Me Too clause. We're interested in negotiating a fair contract with the fire union for the fire department. I know that you have talked about that the fire department did get certain raises in certain years. This morning I did email to you some information with regard to the salary. Right, the salary increases by percentage per fiscal year for the City of Corpus Christi. And the fiscal years included are 2005 through 2014. Currently, we don't have the 2015 numbers because we're still negotiating the contracts, et cetera. But on average, general employees over those numbers of years have had a 9.75% salary increase in their base salaries. Sworn fire
Where's the other side?
Cumulatively has received a 29.25% increase in their base salaries, and that's just, I'm talking about just the COLA, I'm not including steps or anything like that, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And the sworn police have received a 28.75% over that number of years. So what this goes to show is that the firefighters have in fact received at least almost a percentage point more, almost, than the police have in their increases.
It would tend to show that if it were accurate. But of course it contradicts information you gave me just less than a month ago, in which you told me that the police have received a 4% raise each of the last 3 years, only 2 of which are represented on this chart.
The last 4 years?
The last 3 years, the police have received a 4% each of 3 years. So I guess you have
the current fiscal year, the 2015,
Actually,
which we are still negotiating with you, so it's not.
Let me explain. There may be an issue where at one point there was and that may be reflected here in the August 11, February 11. I have provided you some numbers, but they reflected a different time period. I think this includes more years, more information. But there was at one point, and I can't remember, I don't know specifically because I wasn't involved, but there was a point where the economy basically went downhill, and the police union was willing to delay a raise at some point, and I can get more information on that, and that may be why you see these zeros in here that may not be reflected in the contract. So I'll have to get more information on that, but there was some sort of issue with regard to some sort of renegotiation to delay a percentage increase, as I recall. But that's about the general information that I do have at this point.
Okay, well, I guess this doesn't reflect the pay raise the police got last year, when we got 0.
Oh, you're
so
talking
far.
about October 1, 2014?
Yes.
Okay, that's fiscal year 15, and yes, that's not reflected here. We're still, and if you want to do that, I mean, it will show the 4%, it would show the 1.5% that we're placing on the table right now, and the 1.5% that I believe it was 1.5% that the general employees received. So that year was incomplete because we don't have the information for the fire yet, as we're still negotiating this contract.
Okay,
So
I think it makes it inaccurate because it suggests that we've gotten more than anybody else when that's clearly not true.
Well,
Even if
that
we
is
got a
true.
1.5, we wouldn't get it until the last month of this year. So it's practically a non-existent raise. And so what this shows to me is that in fact the police have done 3% better than the fire over that period of time.
Over the
From
last year, in
2005
2015?
From 2005 to 2015. I would point out to you as well that the fire chief last year, if I'm adding it up right, got about more than 15% raise in 1 year alone. And all of your fire administration has done better than the firefighters over the last 3 years. This chart that you've given me doesn't reflect the pay of the assistant city managers and the city manager.
Okay.
All of whom have done a lot better than have the general employees. So if your employees have done poorly, well, I say shame on you because you should have treated them better. But I certainly don't think that this chart represents that fire has done better than other employees. All that said, we can argue till the cows come home about that. But you know and I know that economics is not what is separating the parties at this table right now. What's separating the parties are 3 things: past practice, overtime, which I guess is an economic issue, and EMS.
Well,
and those
and-
are not economic issues.
Well, and I think the economics we still need to talk about, because you brought up points yesterday that I needed to clarify. And any numbers that I give to you, any chart, you're going to claim are inaccurate because they're not going to read what you want them to read, okay? So what I'm
claiming
giving
they're
you,
inaccurate because they're inaccurate, and I'm tired of you
You're-
doing that.
they're
We're going to talk
inaccurate.
about the other chart you just gave us in a minute, and I'm going to point out the inaccuracies in that chart too.
okay, well.
Based on information that you gave me, not based on information that I'm giving you. Based on your own information, your stuff is inaccurate. And I don't understand why you're trying to do that, because you know and I know that economics is not what separates us. It's past practice, it's EMS, and it's overtime.
Well,
right?
but you made it an issue that separates us when you're including this Me Too clause, and you're talking about fairness, and you're talking about, we put a lot of new money on the table. In fact, the costing shows that it's approximately $7.6 million in new money that we're committing to the
We'll argue about
firefighters.
that. We'll argue about that, and we'll agree on some things, we'll disagree on other things. I thought I told you yesterday that we're not in any way belittling the money that the city's putting on the table. And again, that's not what divides us. What divides us are primarily non-economic issues upon which the city simply can't see eye to eye with us.
Well, and I'd like to know also what we're looking to see what we're also getting for that $7.6 million in new monies that we're giving. I mean, this is a negotiation, this is give and take. We're putting a lot of stuff on the table, we're not seeing a lot back. And so that's why we're talking about those 3 non-economic issues, and they have to be talked about with the economics. That's why we're packaging these things, because we need to know, okay, if we're gonna give here, we're gonna get this. Same thing on your side. You know, there has to be concessions on both sides, and they have to be.
And I dispute that we haven't given you stuff. What I'm hearing on my side of the table is we're the only ones that are giving. I mean, we haven't had raises and certification pays in some cases in 30 years. We can't seem to get those. We just gave them up in our last proposal. I mean, we're moving towards you economically. That's not the problem. The problem is non-economics. But yes, we have given you a lot. We've rewritten the entire friggin' contract.
Most of it's status quo.
You have gotten
Most of
much
it's status
additional
quo.
language in your management rights, we've rewritten the discipline article, the grievance procedure article, we've given you an extra appointment, we have agreed to an impasse procedure that I think is beneficial to both parties, and I hope that you will agree with that. It takes politics out of the process. You know, I think that we've given you a lot. We've given you a complete agreement clause, and you've never had that in the contract before. So when you say you've got nothing,
We
I mean, what do
haven't
you want
gotten
us to
the
give you,
complete
money?
agreement without, you know, there's a lot of things, you're saying you're giving us stuff, but there's a lot of caveats to them. On the appointment of the deputies, you're saying you gave us one. We believe that we already had that ability to appoint the additional, deputy. That was something, so we said, let's.
Okay. Let's say that
so we
you're
said-
right on.
So we said that was unclear, and what is the law? You, of course, don't agree with the law, but that's what it is right now. And so that, we're giving that up at this point too, even though you say you're giving us one appointment. We appreciate that, we understand that. But in your concession, there's also something that we're giving up as well. And that is the ability, the protection of the law in order to appoint deputy chiefs in that rank.
But Roxy, right now, today, you have the ability to appoint people in 3 ranks, okay? Deputy chief, assistant chief, and assistant EMS director. And that's only because of the contract. And we've given you another one. Rather than accept that you looked that gift horse in the mouth and said, no, we want more. We want more than what you're giving us. And so, you know, I don't know why incremental gains aren't acceptable to you. You've offered us 5.5% in pay raises over 5 years. 5.5% in pay raises over the next 5 years. That's after a year in which we got nothing. And so, you know, again, we can argue till the cows come home about that. But and at the same time you're offering us that 5.5%, you're also talking about changing overtime in a way that would take $1 million out of the pockets of the firefighters each year of the contract for a 5-year contract. Well, it's 4 years and a month now. So,
But like
and
you said,
by the
that's
way,
gonna be a non-issue.
Huh?
That's gonna be a non-issue, because like you said, with staffing, that's gonna be a, you know, there won't be as much overtime.
There's gonna be
So-
overtime until you get those people online, and what you're asking the
Right.
firefighters to do is work the same amount of
And
time
we're asking
for
the
less money.
firefighters to work the amount of hours that we're paying them to work, and then be entitled to overtime after that.
Okay, but you admit that you're taking away something that the contract gives now.
I'm not sure what the contract gives. It says, there's one word that says scheduled. That's the way it's always, that's the way it was worked, so yes, that's fine. We're actually making the firefighters work the hours that they're supposed to before they're entitled to overtime.
I want to tell you, I understand exactly why you don't want to compare us to the police, because you're talking to us about a different deal on overtime than the one you give to the police. You're talking to us about a different deal on maintenance and standards than you give to the police. You're not willing to promise us the pay raises that you give to police. In every one of these areas where we're on disagreement, with the exception of EMS, because police don't do that, you know, what you're doing is you're asking us to take less than you give to the police. You didn't even propose to change their maintenance and standard language. You didn't even propose to change the way they accrue overtime. You didn't even propose to take away categories of leave from the way they pay overtime. In every instance, you are treating us differently than you're treating the police, who are in a negotiation with you right now. And you know that's true. Your proposals are already on the table in that. And you haven't even proposed what you are locking in with regards to us. And so,
Well,
if you're asking us to take that deal with these economics, the answer is no. And I don't want you to misconstrue that comment that if you sweeten the money deal, we would accept these non-monetary things where we're lobbyists, because we won't. We're going, you know, we can come to agreement on the money if we can see eye to eye on these non-economic issues. I consider FLSA, by the way, I consider the overtime to be a non-economic issue for exactly the reason you suggested. When you add people, overtime will go down. Okay, that's just a fact. But my people will not get less money for working the same. They will get less money for working less. And that's the difference. It's a key difference. And it's a very understandable difference. But what we can't do, what we can't seem to get agreement on, are these non-economic terms. And we have, I think, exhibited trust on this side of the table. We've come to you on complete agreement. We've come to you on management rights. You wanted to beat that up. You're not willing to allow us to keep maintenance of standards in the contract. What your last proposal on past practice is a retraction from the proposal you made last week. Last week, you allowed us to use past practice. Now you're saying you can only use past practice if we agree to it and reduce it to right. That's a non-existent right. You just made it a non-existent right. You made it absolutely worthless. And I don't even know who came up with that, but it's almost insulting, because it makes me feel like you don't respect me enough to know what you're doing. That I'm supposed to look at that and say, oh, that's some kind of good deal. Well, it's not. I'm not gonna sell a pig in a poke to these guys.
And we're not trying to do that. We're sitting here negotiating. I think that it's been, we've talked about what's important to both parties here at the table. I'd like to remind you that even though you keep bringing up the police negotiations, those are separate and apart, and that is a much different situation that we're doing now. We're here at the negotiating table under a settlement agreement, negotiating a brand new contract from the ground up that brought every single issue into light at this negotiation.
That's right.
So that's different than what's happening over at police, rather than they just elected their right to collectively bargain, and so that's being done over there.
I'm just
So we're
asking you to
negotiating-
justify the difference in treatment that you're according police and fire. That's all I'm asking you to do. Why the different treatment?
So you're just saying it's different treatment because we're bringing different proposals and
No,
working
not at
on?
all. I'm saying that rights that both groups have enjoyed for a number of years, you were trying to take from us and not from them. And the only reason you've ever given me for wanting to do that is we used them. And that's
Well,
retaliation, pure and simple.
I don't believe that's true, and I think you're misconstruing that. Like I said,
Well,
we
unfortunately for
agreed-
you, it's on tape.
We agreed to negotiate the entire contract from the ground up, putting each and every part of the old contract at issue. We had to negotiate a whole new thing, so everything became an issue. When we were negotiating before in 2014, before things went south with the union's conduct, we had different priorities set, and we had proposals on the table that didn't touch some of that stuff. But now that we're dealing with the whole contract, we're here to fix the contract. And we're here to fix the issues that affect both parties, and that's what's different about this negotiations and the police negotiations. Now, just because things weren't talked about in the police negotiations doesn't mean it's not something that needs to be addressed. It just may not be addressed at this point. I don't know. I can't explain that. So, or I can't tell you that outright what the strategy is, because I'm not involved in that. And I think that it's not relevant to what we're dealing with here at the table.
And I don't think it's productive to go over what happened in 2014, but I can't leave unchallenged what you just said because of what the union did. You filed a claim on that. The city filed a claim against the union based on that conduct. I'm surprised that I have to remind you that the court dismissed the city's claim based on a motion that we filed. And while you have appeal rights, right now, what the court has told you is you have no claim. Because we didn't do anything wrong.
But we have the ability to appeal it.
But we agreed to negotiate the contract again from the ground up.
Right.
But you're not
With
answering the question I
single-
asked you.
every single
Why are
item
we
at
being
issue.
treated differently than the police?
I don't understand. I don't think that you're being treated differently than the police.
You told me last week the reason we're being treated differently than the police is because we shot ourselves in the foot by filing agreements. It's
That
on
was
tape.
not specifically on that, and if that was what you took from it, I'm not saying that.
Okay. You may not be saying it today. You said it last week. Or the week before. My weeks get a little jumbled. Anyway, this is not productive.
Right.
I just think we have to agree that we just can't quite get there. I mean, I just think we have to agree. We're not gonna, I've tried to be very clear, and I guess I haven't been clear enough, that we're not gonna budge on the past practice. We are as far as we can go. And if that's a deal killer for you, then just tell us, and we don't need to keep beating this horse. It's dead. And we will just go into fact finding, and we'll just, or maybe we'll come up with something but right now, this whole contract's being held up on non-economic issues. And the EMS, we haven't talked about that yet, but quite frankly, I have yet to hear, and I noticed that you don't have anybody from the fire department on your team here with you today. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The lack of uniform threw me for a minute.
Very
But I have asked repeatedly for the chief or anybody to come explain to us why our EMS proposals, which keep getting better, and the last one's better yet, don't solve the staffing problem that you have. And I've still got no answer.
Well, I've explained that to you, and apparently you don't trust what I'm telling you. Your solution only puts a Band-Aid on the issue for a very short amount of time. What we're working on is to create a contract that would help in times of crisis, such as staffing crisis, et cetera, that would be able to guarantee adequate staffing for the operations of the fire department. I don't see where that happens with your proposal when you allow the firefighter to EMS who ride the ambulance to all have the ability to voluntarily demote after a certain number of years. And then what do? They sit as a firefighter one, not being able to be used on the ambulance.
You have the ability to, there's a 14-month moratorium on that right, followed by an ability of the chief to delay any such request for 6 months, followed by a moratorium that can be declared for up to 2 years. So I see what you're calling a Band-Aid, I see as like a 3-year guarantee of no problems. And in the meantime, you've got 80 people coming up the ranks, all of whom are going to be paramedics, for life. So how is that a Band-Aid?
So
Maybe I could hear that better from the chief. He comes in and talks to us, and we can dialogue. My firefighters can dialogue with him. And because maybe he can make us understand, because I do listen to you. And when I go back to my caucus room, I ask the firefighters, what about what she's saying? And what they're telling me is it just doesn't add up. But again, it's a non-economic issue. It's an important issue to the firefighters. I've been clear about that from day one. I asked for interest-based bargaining so we could come to a collaborative approach. You'll recall you declined that. Well, we can talk about money. We could come to agreement about money, okay? But what we can't do is we can't move further towards you on those two issues and overtime. And if those are deal killers, then I suggest that you go with your group and caucus, and let's not waste anybody's time.
I would need at least today to talk to my team and my people about that in order to be able to tell you that that's the deal.
Okay. Well, my only suggestion is this. As you know, I'm here this week and next week, and then I'm out for an extended period. It's possible that we can meet next Monday. It's really the only day that I have. That's at the start of the firefighter convention, but I could meet during that day. I'd have to probably leave by about 4 o'clock because I have obligation with regards to the state convention.
Okay.
But I will hold open that possibility. But I'm telling you that our position is not going to change on those 3 issues. I'll welcome dialogue. I'll talk to you if the cows come home. I'm confident we can reach agreement on the economic issues. But I can't move anymore on those 3. And what I'm going to want to do is start the fact-finding process.
So on the EMS, the thing that strikes at me that's different between our proposals is your voluntary demotion is permanent. And what we're looking for is a solution that would not include permanency, but rather would require a rotation, a significant rotation, off the ambulance, on the ambulance, et cetera. What's the issue with that?
I don't think that it ultimately solves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem because, firefighters who've been on the ambulance a number of years suffer from burnout, and it only gives them a temporary out. I mean, they already have, and we've acknowledged that they can get off, I think, 2 pay periods every 6 months. But of course, but the solution that you're proposing doesn't really help us get burned out people out of the ambulance. And I really want to make this clear that it is not accurate. It is not accurate to say that 80% of the calls are medical and therefore 80% of the work is done by medic units, because the fire department, on the great majority of those calls, runs fire trucks to those same emergency calls, and they engage in the same emergency type of work. It's just not all they do like it is when you're on the ambulance. But there is a tremendous burnout problem. We're trying to address it.
In Corpus Christi?
And in Corpus Christi?
Yes.
I think so. But I also think this, if you look back at the number of people that have actually voluntarily demoted, you know, it's really not that great. Although it can happen in 8 years, it really does happen in 8 years. But it certainly can, and we want to preserve that ability. But, you know, we've given the chief all kinds of moratoriums, and in our latest proposal, we've offered to reopen negotiations at any time that the city wants, and to go through even the new impasse procedure, if that's what the city needs to do the staffing. And the city can always declare an emergency if they literally can't get the staffing. And so there's always that out. We are never, ever going to leave those ambulances unstaffed. We're as proud of that service as you are. And so it is just not true. But we have given the fire chief the tools that he needs, while trying to preserve for firefighters, those that will burn out, and they will, an ability to get out. Nobody serves on the ambulances as long in their fire departments as Corpus Christi does. And I told you last week that you have 2 of the 10 busiest stations in the nation for ambulance calls. I've been told, and I haven't verified this, that it's now 3 of the 10 busiest stations in the United States are here in Corpus Christi. So you've got a tremendous call volume. You've got a great number of people coming online, and in the next 2 years, if you don't hire another class, you're going to have 80 people coming online, all of whom are going to be paramedics within 18 months, some of whom already are. And so, you know, the idea that you need the solution you selected is, I think, just not accurate. You know, I mean, my law partner tells me all the time, she says, you know, Greg, you have immediate negative reaction to any idea not your own. I'm beginning to feel that about, and that's only partially true, I'm beginning to feel that with regards to the fire department and the people who are making the decisions on this EMS proposal. They simply don't like ideas because they didn't come up with them. I think it would have been better if we had done this collaboratively, as I suggested, but that's blood under the bridge. We're where we are now. We've gone as far as we can go.
Okay. Well, we've looked for ways to provide you the out that we've heard you. You know, I just don't think that, you know, I think the issue is not that we don't like your ideas. We've taken them into consideration. The permanency of the voluntary demotion, I think, is what is the problem with regard to figuring out how it affects the operations and being able to staff the apparatuses that we need to staff. I hear you on the burnout and the PTSD, but, you know, that also is true for the fire trucks who are usually the first people to arrive at scenes before the ambulance, and they have to provide services, et cetera. And I know the ambulance is the one that does transport and stays with the patient afterwards, but, you know, that is true with the fire trucks as well. So
it's a difficult situation, as I've gone over before, and I don't want to get in the habit of beating dead horses, but, you know, I mean, people die on these ambulance things. You know, they're dealing with people in great distress, and it takes a toll. It really does. And you're talking about doing it 8, 10, 12 years, you know, where maybe half the time you're on that ambulance doing that day in and day out. It really takes a toll. You need to come up with a system where you can revolve people through that, because it's a young person's game. And you need, and every other fire department has done it, and you can do it too. But, you know, what you're doing is you're trying to create much more of a safety net than you actually need. And we're willing, you know, if you put this in place, you've got major holds in place for the next 3 years, and we can negotiate a whole system at that time. What we probably can't do is come to agreement on exactly what that system is here at the table with as many other issues as we have. But even if we solve that problem,
we still got the past practice problem. We still got the overtime problem. And all three of them, I feel like we, done everything we can. All we're asking on past practice and overtime is status quo. That is absolutely all we're asking. And, the EMS, it's a real problem, but we're trying to help you address it, including offering a reopener. That you could take the impasse if we couldn't come to agreement. And I quite frankly, any time that you aren't able, you just literally aren't able to staff the ambulances, to me, that's an emergency. Because those ambulances have to be staffed. So it's not true to say that there is not an out for the fire chief. It's just not. What we're offering you is a way that these people stay certified. What you're offering us is a situation where if you're truly burned out, the only way to get out is to retire or to decertify. That's a lose-lose situation. And, what we try to get you to understand is the proposal that you're making, is going to lead people to exercise that option. We don't want that any more than you do. That's the problem.
Have we had people retire or drop their patch or ask for voluntary demotion specifically because of burnout?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I will say this, that I think we have some people watching these negotiations who are going to make decisions based on the outcome of these negotiations. So I do think that's true. I don't have any hard and fast numbers for you. But I think the solution that we proposed would give everybody the confidence they need that this system can continue unaffected. And that's, I haven't been able to convince y'all of that, so I guess that's on me.
Okay. Well, we'll have to caucus and it'll take me talking to my team and my people at the city and then I'll have to let you know.
When do you think you'll know whether you want to try and meet next Monday?
I can't tell you today. It depends on who I can get to today and who I can talk to today. But it will definitely have to be within the 72-hour notice requirement. I'm hoping to have an answer by at least Thursday.
Okay.
Wednesday or Thursday. But that's my goal. And obviously we have to have that 72-hour notice requirement for the meetings. I'll mark it on my calendar if you mark it on yours, just to block it off.
Okay. There are a couple of things that we could talk about today that were very close. I think we could, if we could get any of that out of the way, that would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm thinking specifically of Article 9.
What'd you say, number 9?
Article 9. We have agreed to the language of Section 1C that you proposed without making any changes. We're still a little bit apart on President's time off. We put back in the paragraph B, if you'll agree to make those reinstatement lists permanent. We still think that we should only pay for the base salary rather than the full salary and benefits. I would note that on the police side, under their current contract, they only provide leave, they provide sick leave as opposed to personal leave. They provide it only for the base salary for the president, who's off full-time, and a vice president, who's off half-time. And there's been no proposed to change that. Other than that, I think we're in agreement on everything else. So I would think that might provide a basis for an agreement. On Article 32, which is the Assistant Chief, Deputy Chief, we're asking you to leave it at 4. I would point out that that is an increase, and to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, we have added a line into Section 3 to indicate that the Assistant EMS Director appointment is in addition to the 4 appointments.
I did have one question on the competitive examination for the deputy chief position. There really isn't anything provided for in the Civil Service Act on that, because it's by appointment, so it would have to be set up through this agreement, so we would have to deal with that.
We might, but the Civil Service Act does contemplate competitive examination for the assistant department head level. It allows cities of a certain size to have certain numbers of appointments, but if they have more assistant department heads than the number of appointments they're allowed, then it is competitive. And so I don't think we need to do that, but and I'm aware of several departments that have both appointed and competitively tested, deputies or assistants or whatever they call them. So if you want to look at the promotions article, I know it has some special procedures for, but I'd ask you to consult with the fire department and think realistically, are they planning to maybe, competitively test for deputy chief? I would think probably not.
Okay.
But we certainly would be willing to look at that. Anyway, that's 2 that I would hope we could get out of the way. I did want to talk to you a little bit about our Article 10 and 11 proposal. Gotta find them. We have eliminated the 1.5% increase that would be immediate. I don't think this agreement is going to be ratified much in advance of the new fiscal year. So we've just really put that on top of the 2% we were asking for the first year. We have suggested that we make this just a 3-year agreement instead of a 4 or 5-year agreement because, for one thing, that would ease your concerns to think about the EMS, because you'd have another chance in the context of an overall negotiation to look at the EMS question again. And we can look at it a couple of years from now in the context of how many additional people did we add. They're all paramedic certified. How has it affected the problem? So even without the reopener that we've added to the EMS, that might give you a better comfort level because the moratorium that lasts until 2016 would cover a goodly portion of that period, and then the chief would have up to a potential 2-year moratorium if events justified it. So that's the thinking there. With regards to Article 11, we've dropped our request for any, I think, raises in certification pays, except EMT and paramedic. The reason we're raising those is to create an incentive for people to want to keep those patches. The hazmat, we're just disagreeing about when those would be implemented. We're still asking for you to consider a minor increase in staff assignments and acting pay. Neither of those have had an increase in many, many years. And so we think that would be appropriate. I still, you keep leaving out the grandfather provision, the expense and textbook reimbursement, the performance work biweekly pay periods. Are you just not getting around to that, or is that an out-and-out rejection by the city of those provisions?
No, it's not. We are trying to figure out if that's the best use for the value of those monies. It's not an outright rejection That's why they keep going back and forth. I just wanna leave it open because if those monies are better used for, maybe we can apply them in another area, then that's something that we could do, so.
Yeah, and if you do something like that, you need to tell me where you wrapped that, because, you know, I mean, these are the kinds of things, you know, the chart you sent me in your today's email didn't, you know, show any cost savings for eliminating the performance award or expense and textbook reimbursement or the savings that you told me you're gonna get on overtime, which, you know, in a 3-year contract, for example, would be $3 million. So, you know, those things are all factors that we thought were not included in the additional monies you're putting on the table, and which would greatly reduce those amounts. And obviously, you know, whatever your budget for the fire department goes up, that's a percentage. And I want to look at, you know, the percentage raises in every place else to see how we stack up. You know, just, you know,
The fire administration, the management team, the general employees certainly. But, you know, even looking at your 10-year chart, you know, the fact remains that police have gotten 12% in the last 3 years. And during that time, we've gotten much less. And I believe so, anyway, again, economics are not what are going to torpedo this contract. It's these non-economic items that I think, I can't believe we can't come to an agreement on economics. But, you know, there is a trust issue here. It would be very, very hard for this team, and they would feel incredibly misled if you agreed to a pay raise with us only to agree to a larger pay raise for police a month from now after the recent history. So, I mean, we need to figure out some way to deal with that problem. We need some kind of assurance from you that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know how possible that would be. Because like I said, you know, it's very difficult to be negotiating a police contract here at the fire negotiations, you know, negotiate their wages here with y'all. So
You
I
know-
don't think that you would like them to be doing the same as well. But I understand, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I know, but it would be different if, well,
the proposals you're offering us are better in some circumstances and worse in others. But what I'm seeing is on all of these issues where we're still apart, the police have a better deal than us in every one of them. Not in the current pay proposals from the city. The city's made the same 1,111. But the 1.5 that you're giving us for this fiscal year, the police got a 4. So if you look at it
That
that
was
way,
bargained for in their last contract, yeah.
they're getting 8 over 5 years, and we're getting 5.5 under your current proposal for that same 5-year period. And so even there, you know, maintenance of standards, overtime, you know, president's time off, all of those things, the police have a better deal than we do. And so I don't think that it's, I understand what you're saying when you say, hey, you need to negotiate your own deal. But at the same time, you know, the police achieved a pay comparability deal in their last contract that we didn't have. As a result, their wages have gone up and ours have not. And so we're looking to redress that imbalance. In your chart that goes back, I don't know, 10 years or so, the pay raises that we got are pretty heavily weighted towards the front end. Before my time, I can't take credit for any of those. So.
Okay.
Do y'all wanna take a moment and caucus and see if we can make any movement on 32 and 9? It would be-
Since it's part of a, we're attempting to package everything, and I'd like to, I don't know that we can get that done here this morning. I need to, talk to my team about all of the issues and see what we can get done. And just, in all fairness, I know that when you're pointing out a specific number of years with regard to economics or proposals, et cetera, it's easy to pick out a certain number of years to make it look a certain way. What we're doing is we're looking at the global aspect of it. We like to look at what it really looks like. I understand what you're saying when you say it look, you know, if you take those last 3 years, it looks like the fire's gotten nothing and the police have gotten a lot more. But there was a lot of things that happened before that that would even that out. You know, there's a lot of negotiations that happened both on the fire and the police that have to be taken into account. Those were negotiated contracts. There were give and take on both sides. So I just like you to, I know when you're looking at certain periods of time, look at it, but then look at the whole picture and see what it really looks like.
Point taken. And, you know, what I would say again, is that I really do think that the two sides can come together economically. Especially if we make it a shorter contract. But there's these non-economic issues that are just incredibly important.
Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and caucus and touch base with you.
Okay, so we'll hang around for a little while to see if there's anything else we can do today.
Okay.